Welcome to our first and a more advanced series of Photoshop tutorials. Here we'll talk about some interesting settings and techniques that will get you more acquainted with Photoshop in general. Let's talk about curves. Curves is a setting in Photoshop that allows you to get richer tones and colors in your pictures. To start, we've opened up our usual coffee image here, and we'll click on the Image drop-down, then Adjustments, then Curves. You can also hit Ctrl+M at the same time. Doing this will open the Curves window, which looks like a neat graph chart. In the middle, you should be seeing a line going from the bottom left to the top right. If you want to apply a quick preset which will set the settings for you, you can click the drop-down and change from the default to other settings in the list. Setting the color preset to color negative changes some things here, which we'll explain. As you can see, the individual values on the chart have changed. The original black line is still the same, but each individual color has changed. This is a permanent way to change the values of the image, but if we wanted to make it something a little less permanent and tweak the settings as we edit our image, we can make a new layer by going to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then Curves. This will allow us to have our own layer that we can edit the properties of in the Properties window. So over here in our Properties window, you can see that we can edit our curves just like the image edit we were doing before, but it is not permanent as we can hide or unhide the layer using the I button next to the layer. So the main thing to take away from curves is reading the histogram and placing points. We can place points on the histogram so we can change the color changes anywhere in the image, based on the dark spots or the lighter spots of the image. As you can see on our image, the shadows and highlights of our image aren't very great, so we can edit our colors without much interference. So if we put one point in the middle, one point on the end, and one point on the beginning, we can change the colors and alter them in subtle or more advanced ways. Curves help out many Photoshop users with images that have bad contrast or bad lighting. Use curves next time you have an image that needs tweaking. It's one of the most powerful tools in Photoshop's arsenal. Welcome to our second tutorial in our advanced line of Photoshop tutorials. This time we'll talk about some features that are similar to curves, but do things in a more individual way. Brightness, contrast, and exposure. Just like before, we'll start out with our image available. As before, we could alter the image from the Image drop-down and brightness and contrast under the adjustments, but we'll create a new layer using Layer, New Adjustment Layer, then Brightness and Contrast. That way we can adjust without permanently changing the image. Once in the adjustment layer, we can see that we have a brightness slider and a contrast slider. Tweak your image using these settings. Left is less brightness, making it darker. Right is more, making it lighter. Negative contrast washes out the colors, while positive contrast makes the colors stand out more, but it can make the shadows too dark. Next, we'll add an exposure layer. Go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, then Exposure Layer. Doing this, you can see we have more sliders here. The exposure slider going from negative to positive can darken and lighten the image much like the previous layers. Offset itself changes the absolute light and darkness in the image, so treat that option with care. Gamma correction allows you to add and subtract gamma, general lighting, to the entire image. It starts out at 1, and going left adds more gamma, while going right subtracts gamma. Using all these options allows you to tweak the image as you see fit, so you can make best use of lighting to get the image you want right for your projects. Welcome to the third advanced tutorial in our Photoshop series. We'll be talking about the hue and saturation layer, which works similar to our other layer and adjustment tutorials. Here I have my own image open from before. To set up a hue and saturation layer, just like before, we'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, then put a new hue and saturation layer down on top of the original image. So with hue and saturation, we can see that we can adjust the layer's color's hue. The saturation, how deep the colors are. or how light they are, to grayscale, or lightness, how dark or light in general the image is. In an image, you can make the colors much more vibrant by sliding the saturation more to the right than usual. Here we can see our coffee image stand out much more visually. And if we change the hue towards more of a red spectrum, we can get the coffee image to be very strong in color indeed. Use the lightness slider to make sure that things aren't too bright, as extremely vibrant color can be akin to looking into the sun for some viewers of your images. That's all for this tutorial, as you can change images you see fit to make them pop. Welcome to our fourth tutorial in our advanced series. This time, we're going to go with a more exercise-focused approach to help you get more acquainted with what a client wants and needs for their projects. Today's exercise: creating web banner ads for a client. There are many sizes that a client needs for their projects, and when doing web banner ads, you may need to do all or some of them. We'll go over the industry standards so that way you can make the banners needed for your projects. The first size we'll go over is the large leaderboard. It's 970 by 90 pixels. To start, we'll create a new image, and then we'll set the width to 970 and the height to 90. That'll give us the dimensions of the image that we want. We'll create a simple white background here. Then apply a quick text ad. Make sure your text is in black so it shows up on the background. Write 10 apples for $3.99. To center the text on the banner, go to Select All, then hit the Center Layer option just below the main menu here. From there, add an image of an apple. Here I've added a quick image of an apple I found on the net to both sides of the banner to give it more of a friendly look. And if we were to be finished here, this would be the first type of ad we would have to create for our client. Next, let's create a half-page ad, which is a 300 pixel by 600 pixel version. First, save our image as a PSD. Now, change our image to a 300 by 600 canvas. Go to Image, Canvas Size, and change the inches drop-down to pixels. Here, type in 300 width, 600 height. You'll notice our apples and text is now strangely off screen, and our background isn't fully white. We'll fix all of that and show you how to continue to make other sizes of ads. If you notice, the apple images aren't exactly gone. They're just off screen to the image's canvas. Let's bring those apples back to the top and bottoms of our image now. Then, let's use the paint bucket icon on the left and fill in our white background again. Remember to click the correct layer, which should be the first layer in your order. If it helps, name your layers so that you can remember which is which. Now that we have our white background again, what about our text? For that, let us change the spacing by pressing Enter on certain parts of the text. Here at Apples should do it. Move the text onto the canvas. And resize the text as necessary. For vertical text, I like to use centered text under the Paragraph tab of the font properties for a more pleasing aesthetic. And there you have it. We have a new ad that can save as a separate PNG or JPEG from our original Apple ad. From here, we can create all the rest of the industry standard ad sizes: 160 by 600, 120 by 600, 336 by 280, 300 by 250, 728 by 90, 468 by 60, 200 by 200 and 250 by 250. See if you can make Apple ads for each one of them. For our next project design tutorial, we'll work on creating some great YouTube channel art for yourself or for any clients using Photoshop. Let's get started with the correct size for YouTube channel art. Open a new file, and then set the width to 2560 and the height to 1440. As you start off here, you can see there's a lot of space for you to create some good channel art. What I recommend here is starting out with the theme of your channel or your clients. Is it a science channel? Is it a space theme? You'll need a good background here to show off the tone and mood of the channel in question. Let's assume space is the theme here. I've gone and grabbed a freebie space background here and imported it into the image. With this, we can have a nice canvas of art to build the YouTube's mood and image from. Our imaginary space YouTube is called Deep Cosmos. So let's create a great text effect to show off the name of the channel. First, create your text. Make it large enough to be visible. Then set the color by clicking the color part of the properties window and clicking a part of the image. Then we'll go into the layer blending option, give it a stroke, then click an inner glow effect. I've also used a different font here to give more of a unique look here. The type of font is up to you. I also recommend stacking the text on the right, so the rest of the art can breathe and show off the theme for the channel. Add more text in a readable font, probably not cursive, for what the channel is used for, space exploration. Any extra social media links. I'd not use any more than 2 fonts on your images as well, as it is a design error to use too many different fonts. And this will create a very basic YouTube channel art that will evoke a great wonder about what the channel is based around, and draw viewers in with its great visual design. In our next project design tutorial, we'll go over how to make a Facebook ad. Facebook ads are similar to the industry standard ad designs, so we'll go over the basics really quick and then design an ad in a standard size. Single ads are the easiest type to do, as the other options Facebook gives you for ads are multiple image ads, video ads, and a few more. As before, we want to open a new image with the correct size. The standard Facebook ad size is 1200 pixels by 618 pixels. Let's open an image with this size now. From here, we'll create an image that really pops for our audience. Let's say we're creating an image for a seafood company. Let's go grab an image of some great lobster dinner. On top of that, you want to make the image have something that stands out for your audience. So adding some text that implies the dinner is irreplaceable or you can't find it anywhere else is to create that type of rarity that clients want their products to have. This is not necessarily true of every ad you make, but a nice quip or message about the product you're advertising will help with the ad. We'll add that in, and then we'll touch up the image by adding a quick inner glow filter, and adding more of a vignette look by adding a dark glow, but only around the inside edges of the image. After that, you're done and ready to continue making more ads for Facebook pages. These are the ads you typically will see in Facebook feeds. In this project design tutorial, we'll go over how to make a Facebook cover page. Facebook cover pages are similar to our YouTube cover pages in that you can make them as expressive as you or the client wants. As before, we want to open a new image with the correct size. The standard Facebook cover size is 851 pixels by 315 pixels. Let's open an image with this size now. From here, we'll do as we did before and create something a little more exciting like our YouTube cover image. Let's make this one about science and grab a picture of a laboratory background. Make sure if you use images, you get them from approved sources. No one wants to use copyrighted images in someone else's project. Here we'll add some text, as well as maybe some other social media URLs in our image to give the impression that the page is outside of Facebook as well. Once you've got the look right, it's just as simple as a YouTube cover page. One more thing, if you want to get the ratios right for mobile, make an image that is 640 pixels wide by 360 pixels tall. After that, it's really easy to make more cover pages as you see fit, as well as make sure to save everything as a PSD, so you can edit the cover page in case there's errors. Facebook also accepts PNGs for cover pages, so don't worry about compatibility too much. One of the best ways to make a stunning image that allows the viewer to get the message and the image tied together in a beautiful way are quote images. These are the type of images that you see with words overlaid or cut out of the image to make it look more like art than just text on an image. To show you how to create this image that I have here, let's start with a generic background so we can make something stand out. I went and I found a picture of a pile of leaves. This will be our base that we'll use to create the image. The words that we create will go into the leaves to look like they're coming out of the leaves. To start, I'll write the words life. It's never too late to jump in over the leaves itself. Doing so creates the usual text over image effect, which is fine on its own, but we want to make the words look as if they're underneath the leaves or coming out of the leaves. To do this, let's create another background layer copy on top of the text. And we can drag the opacity down enough so that we can see the words behind it. Doing this will allow us to see what leaves overlap onto the letters, and we'll begin extracting the letters using the Quick Selection tool. We'll do this so it has some of the leaves on top to make the letters look good and buried. This is the most time-consuming process of this effect, as again, you want to make it look like the leaves are laying on top, so take your time to get the leaves to look good. Next, you'll want to create a layer mask after you've selected your leaves on your background layer copy. Click the new Layer Mask button. Change the opacity back to 100%. Next, you'll want to add a drop shadow to your top background layer, so the leaves create a kind of 3D effect on your letters. The last effect we'll make here that makes the letters look like they were placed there instead of just added to the image is a texture that looks like rough paper or stone. Do this through the Pattern Overlay effect. Change the opacity just down to about 20%. This will allow the text to look like it was placed into the leaves instead of our viewer thinking we added them manually. And that's it for this effect. It's a simple one that really makes some images pop and gets some great views. Welcome to our next introductory tutorial for Photoshop. Today's topic is about the healing brush and the spot healing brush. We'll be using it to show you how you can touch up blemishes on a photo. This is great for touching up photos of friends, family, and other things you need to make look good. We'll start by taking a photo of someone having blemishes on their face and opening it in Photoshop. Doing this will allow us to have something to work with to show off the healing brush. If we select the healing brush here on the left, with the nice bandage icon on it, you can see that we have options up at the top. Sampled is what you normally want to use for your restoration of your faces and such in your blemished images. Using this, we'll hold the Alt key and click on a spot we want to use as a basis for healing the image. Once we've done that, we'll heal a spot here, and you can see that the brush has figured out what to use nearby to make the healing effect of the brush take place. If we continue, we can remove all the blemishes, and it's a pretty amazing tool. Another way we can do this is, of course, with our spot healing brush, which will do something akin to the selection tool and automatically come up with what you want to heal. At the top are our options. We can do proximity match, which will use what's around the spot you want to heal to fix, create texture, which will create a mix of textures from around the image and is generally not good for face touch-ups. Content Aware will try to guess based on what's on the layer itself and what seems appropriate here. Proximity Match is actually one of the best options, and you'll see that it tries to fit the fixes in where it can. So be careful with your healing, and have fun making faces and other things look great. Smart filters are one of the most powerful features of Photoshop. We'll start this tutorial by showing you how we can make a smart object, add a filter to the image without it being permanent, and show you the power of smart filters that way. We'll start by opening this image of flowers here, and you can see that we have a great setup of a butterfly and some flowers. What we want to do is convert this image into a smart object, and all we have to do is right-click on the image and then click Convert to Smart Object. Doing that will set us up for any filters we want to add to this image, and it can be quite addicting to add filters and mess with the image. So let's try to isolate the butterfly here from the rest of the image. What we want to do is go ahead and go to Filter, then to go to Texture, and then Stained Glass. We'll fix the stained glass texture so that it looks smaller and looks good. We can see our butterfly in the back there. Next, we'll draw a nice quick selection around the butterfly. This is what we want to remain, and the rest stay in the stained glass filter. Last, we'll press Ctrl-I, which will put all the selection in black and allow us to see the butterfly. From there, we can tighten the mask around the butterfly so it looks like it's floating above the stained glass. And that's just the basics with what you can do with smart filters. Easy, simple to use, and you don't have to worry about them permanently editing the image this way. This next tutorial will go over the basics of how to create a great image dispersion effect. This effect is great because it looks like the image is being torn apart, but in a way that looks realistic and graphically amazing. Let's learn how to do this together. I've opened up an image of a man here. First, I'll start by creating a duplicate layer of the man in the background. Then I'll lasso over the man in the background layer. Right-click, and then do Fill. Make sure it's set to Content Aware, and it will let you fill in the background over the original man in the picture. We'll then select the entire model by using the Quick Selection tool. From here, depending on your Photoshop client, you can use Refine Edge or Select and Mask and give more of a refined edge to the hair on the model, so we can pick up individual hairs and outlines. Before clicking OK on the Refine Edge, let's output the selection to a layer mask. Now you can see the model is on a separate background. Let's duplicate the layer now. Then apply the mask we made from the previous layer. I'll rename this layer to the dispersion effect. Then I'll make a duplicate of this layer and rename it to man. Now I'll select the dispersion layer, then select filter, then liquefy. Next, I'll warp the model using the forward warp tool so we can make sure we can have a nice canvas for our effect later. This will determine the size of the dispersion effect. Take your time with the liquefy, then when you think you're done, hit OK. Now we'll make another mask, which we'll do by hitting Alt before clicking the new mask button, the little circle and a rectangle. So we fill the mask with black. This way, our dispersion effect is hidden until we need it. Before we continue, make the original background layer with our picture of our man hidden, so we can edit effects in. Now on our layer called Man, we'll make a new mask with no black filled in, so just click the New Mask button without holding any keys down. Once we've done that, make sure you're on the Man layer's mask. Make sure your brush is set to black for the foreground color. Select the Brush tool, then select a brush that will give a great dispersion effect. There are brushes out there for free you can download that will give you the effect desired, so look for them. We'll edit the image to give a bit of a destroyed look. Then we'll switch to the dispersion layer and its mask as well. Switch the color to white, and start masking in, uncovering, the warped layer we did earlier. This will give you the effect of a dispersion going onto the image and looks really great. Experiment with this feature. It will allow you to create some really interesting images. Welcome back to our next tutorial in Photoshop, where we'll go over how to do a double exposure effect. A double exposure effect is how we'll blend two images together to make an interesting art project pop. Perhaps your client or project will want you to create some striking images here, and doing so through Photoshop, you will definitely wow the viewer of this image. Starting out, let's pick two images that we want to blend together. Here I'll blend an image of a beach ball with an orange. The idea of playing volleyball with a giant orange is pretty hilarious, don't you think? To start blending these two images together, I'll take the image of the orange, use the Quick Selection tool, and select the whole orange. Once I do that, I'll copy the orange selection into the image of the volleyball. As you can see here, the orange is way too large to be able to be blended with the volleyball. I'll need to scale the orange down to size. To do this, we'll need to make a copy of the volleyball layer to start off with. Drag the layer and make sure it's the top layer over the orange. Set the opacity to about 50%. Then we'll shrink the orange to about the same size of the volleyball. Do this by clicking the link icon up near the width and height. This way, with the opacity, we can see exactly what size we need the orange at. Apply the transformation when done. Next, we'll create a layer mask by clicking on the orange. Control-click the image to select all. Then move to the volleyball layer, and click the New Mask button at the bottom. Once we have that mask, we'll make a copy of the orange layer, and then make a black mask of that layer by holding the Alt key and clicking New Mask. Using the Quick Selection tool, we can select the parts of the volleyball we want to erase. Once we've gotten the image the way we want, you can see that it has this great dual blend effect of having a volleyball that looks like a huge orange. Make sure to leave on the background for the largest effect of showing off the volleyball orange in the scene. Now you know how to use layer masks to blend two images
Welcome to
together.
the next tutorial in our Photoshop series.
We'll be doing this tutorial about a great neon text effect for your text. It's a simple effect that will make it really fun to add text to your images of brick walls, or nighttime building photos, and more. First, we'll start out with a brick wall image. Any brick wall image will do, as we will put our text over it and make it glow. Let's add some text now to the image and write neon, probably in a cursive font of some kind. Make sure the font size is large enough to fit into the middle of the image. Next, we'll add a hue and saturation layer to the image, so select the background layer, then go to Layer, click New Adjustment Layer, and then Hue and Saturation. Set the saturation to pretty low, and the lightness as well, but not too dark. We want it to be bright enough that we can see the brick wall. Next, create a new layer which we'll call Clouds. You could do this, of course, by clicking the New Layer button at the bottom, which looks like a new page. Here we'll add clouds to the layer by clicking Filter, then Render, then Clouds. Create a black layer mask on that cloud layer by Alt-clicking the New Layer Mask button. Make sure your Clouds layer is set to divide on the layer mode here. Let's use our brush tool here to uncover some clouds. Set the foreground color to white. Make sure the layer mask is selected. And set the opacity of our brush to about 50%. Make sure your brush hardness is also 0% as well. Once that's done, uncover some clouds behind the neon word. Next, we'll start working on our text. Make sure to change the font of the text to something blue if it isn't already. And go into the layer blending modes. We'll add a bevel and emboss effect to the text, making sure the style is inner bevel. The technique is smooth. The depth 185, the direction up, the size 3, and the soften 16. We'll also add an inner shadow effect, where the blend mode is multiply, the opacity 40%, the distance 5, the choke 0, and the size 5. Then we'll add an inner glow effect, where the mode is screen, the opacity 75, the noise 0, the choke 0, and the size 8. Make sure to make the technique here source center. Then hit OK. Create a duplicate layer of that text. Put it below the top layer of text, then convert it to a smart object. Add a Gaussian filter using the Filter dropdown, Blur, then Gaussian Blur. Set the radius to about 11 pixels. Now we'll create the wire that the neon sign is connected to the wall by creating a new layer above the clouds layer. Set your brush first to one with a full hardness, then about 13 pixels in width. Use the pen tool here on the layer and click and drag out a line across the layers here in a curvy wave. Right-click on the line and click Stroke Path. Make sure the Simulate Pressure option is turned on. Right-click the path, then click Delete Path. We'll add a blending layer effect to the line, bevel and emboss. Make sure that the depth is 245, size 0, and soften 3. Lastly, we'll add a more soft blue glow to the clouds in another layer. Add another layer on top of this layer, then switch to a soft brush with no hardness, with the size close to the size of our letters. Set the opacity to about 63%. Brush in some blue. Set the layer blending to soft light. And there you have it. Our neon sign is complete. Welcome to our next Photoshop tutorial. This time we'll be doing a great fire text effect. This can create a great illusion of text that looks like it's either made of fire or on fire. We've already started with a great fire effect image we'll use later in the tutorial. We'll proceed by opening a new file, making the height 1280 and the width 720. Change the background to black by using the Paint Bucket tool, and make sure the foreground color is black. Use the Text tool next, and a great tall font. I'll type the word fire here so we can see the effect on it later. Let's go to the blending options on our layer and add an outer glow. Change the color in the box here to F70300, then hit OK. Select the satin blending next and change that color to 872D0F, and hit OK as well. Change the opacity on the satin effect to 100%. Change the distance to 10 pixels, then hit OK. Now select Inner Glow. Change the blend mode to color dodge here. Next, change the color to E5C23B, then hit OK. Change the opacity to 100%, the size to 10 pixels, then hit OK. Now we're done with our text, so hit right-click on the text layer and rasterize our type. Now we're going to fade out the top of our fire text. So use the eraser tool and set the brush to 250 pixels with 0 hardness. Erase some of the text as you see here. Now we'll go up to Filter, Distort, then Zigzag. Set the amount to 4 and the ridges to 4. Make sure the style is set to Pond Ripples and hit OK. Now we'll select our fire image we've opened and copy that into our text image we're working on. Position the fire image over our text, then we'll switch over to the Channels tab here next to our layers. Hold Ctrl and click the green layer to load a selection of the areas of fire in our image. Head back to the Layers tab, then press Ctrl J to make a copy of the selection we got from the Channels tab. Delete our original fire layer. Here I'll rename the layer Fire Main to stay organized. We'll move the fire around to wherever we like in the image. From here, we'll resize the image to fit over our text, then duplicate the layers so we can make more fire effect on our text. Be sure to resize, rotate, and erase edges of the fire around the text so it looks like the text is on fire realistically. And that's how you do this effect. In our next tutorial for Photoshop, let's create a great lens flare effect for our photos. Of course, you could use the lens flare effect in Photoshop, but it usually comes out pretty cheaply made and poorly well done. We'll go make our own effect and have it look great and professional. So we'll take our image of a sunset in the back here and add a new layer to the scene. Then we'll take a brush and make sure the hardness is set to 0, the size to about 300, and then we'll change the color of our brush to white. Next we'll paint a spot, and then zoom in to the brush effect on our image. We'll add some noise to our effect using Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Use about 3.5% of noise. Make sure it's uniform and monochromatic. And hit OK. The noise is going to prevent the effect from banding if we scale the effect. Now let's duplicate the layer through the right-click Duplicate Layer option, or you can use Ctrl J. We'll name the new layer White and the old layer Orange. Next, we'll add color to the orange layer. Hide the white layer. Then go to Image, Adjustments, then Hue and Saturation. We'll color it by turning on the Colorize option. Move the hue over to a nice orange, and the saturation near 100%. You can make it a little lighter or darker if you'd like. Now we'll set the orange layer to a blend mode of Screen. Then we'll set the white layer to a blend of Linear Dodge Add. With the orange layer, we're going to free transform. Draw out our orange layer a bit, making sure that the link is selected to keep the ratio. Commit the changes. We'll select both layers. And we can drag it wherever we want. So let's move them over the sun and the image, and then free transform the effect so it's large and covering the sun. Make sure your two images are centered together. Now we have our lens flare effect. If you want to make sure that you don't want to wash out the color in the image, go to the orange layer, set it to screen, and then the white layer to linear dodge add. Change the opacity of the orange layer down to 50% or so. With the white layer, we're doing the trick here, which is the fill opacity rather than the actual opacity. Set that to about 15% or 20%. You can play with the opacity and fill layer here, and also do some transforming and stretching the lens flare effect to hit more parts of the photo. This is a very quick and easy way to generate a lens flare that you have full control over the way it looks on your image. Welcome to the next tutorial in our Photoshop series. We're going to go over a way to create a quick lomography effect. And a lomography effect is a type of effect that you might see on Instagram photos or other types of photos that make it look kind of a hipster-like or retro look. Now, it's very easy to create this look. It's actually extremely fast to create this look in Photoshop. All you have to do is open up a photo. You can see, for example, I have a photo right here. You want to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Curves. And we're going to make a new Curves layer here. Now I'm going to make the Curves layer called the lomography effect, which we'll go ahead and type that in. And you can see we've got a nice little layer that goes over our background. It also has its own layer, so that way we won't have to worry about making the effect on the image and not having it affect the image permanently. So the way we start this effect is we go through and check out the curves. So we've got the histogram here, and we want to start out by actually putting a point here and dragging it down a little bit, which you see will actually drag down some of the shadows in the image. And then you want to put a little point up here and drag that one up, which will actually drag in some more light into the image. Then we'll go into the red, and we'll actually put a little point there, drag that down a little bit so we can get some more in there. But we actually want to drag the shadows up a little bit so we can get some more darkness, depth to the image. We also want to drag up the end here as well, and go to the green, and do the same thing, drag up a little bit there, drag down a little bit at the top. And then when we get to the blue, we'll actually do this a little bit different. We actually want to drag up on the previous one, and we actually want to drag down at the top here, which will actually add a lot of different blues to the image there. So if we go back to the original RGB, we can actually pull up the shadows a bit, because we want to create that kind of soft tone in the shadows as well. And by doing that, that allows us to create a great lomography effect. It's actually kind of overdone here. It's a little bit too much on the image. So if we go to the opacity, and when you turn the opacity down to maybe about like 50, 55, you can see that it has put itself over the image, and you can see a nice effect on your image that gives it kind of a hipster or retro look. And you can turn on and off the layer to see the difference in the image as we put the Lomo effect on. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. To our advanced GIMP tutorial, where we'll actually show you a way how to do digital black and white conversion. It's quite an easy effect to do. And we'll start by opening up an image that you might have seen before on a previous tutorial. We'll open that up and we'll show you how we'll be able to do the conversion here. Now, you can do a saturate effect in GIMP as well, but what I like to do is create a new layer. So we'll go over here and we'll go ahead and make a new layer. We'll make that transparent, that's fine. And from there, we'll also create a layer mask. So go ahead and add a layer mask to this layer. Make sure that it's set to white so it's full opacity. And you want to change this layer's mode to saturation. And by changing this layer's mode to saturation, you'll be able to change the opacity on the saturation on the layer. To get the saturation on the layer, you'll go over to the bucket tool and you will put in black on the actual layer itself. And this will create desaturation of the layer, and you'll be able to see the entire layer is in black and white. Now, you can set the opacity on this so the effect is not that dramatic, so you can have some color, you can have less color, all the way up to 100%, so you can change this as you will, instead of just using the saturation effect, which will be one time only. You can use this to great effect to choose the granular control over the black and white conversion effect. Now, what you can also do is with this and having the mask, you can go to the original layer itself, use the scissors tool, and you can pick out parts of the image you want to have in color itself. So if you see here, I have picked out some of the glasses to be in color, and the scissors tool is one of the best tools for this as it tries to find the edges of the glasses on our background layer here. And of course, you can drag each point to make sure it tries to find all of the different parts of the glasses, and then we'll go ahead and click inside to select it. And if we do that and then go back to our layer mask for our saturation layer, we can go in there and we can select the brush tool, make sure it's set to black because we're going to be painting on the layer mask so we can make the color shine through, and you can just start painting in those glasses there and make those glasses show up in actual color compared to the rest of the image. And that's just a very quick way of how to do digital black and white conversion. Welcome to the next in our tutorial series about GIMP. In this next tutorial, we'll go over a quick way how to do a coloring of a sketch that you might scan in or you have received on the internet. And it's really easy to start coloring in GIMP. To start, we'll go ahead and have our sketch open, as you can see right here, and we will go ahead and add a new layer above that sketch. So we'll go ahead and make that a transparent layer, and we will also make sure that that layer is set to multiply instead of normal, because if it is set to normal, you'll just draw the color over the sketch beneath that layer, but with multiply, it actually adds the color over the layer, but in a way so that the previous layer on the bottom shows through. So if you see right here, we've set our color to something that's a little bit more skin toned. Make sure to do that as well, hit OK. And then we will start coloring in over top our sketch. And you can see, just by coloring in here with the color that we picked, a nice skin tone color, we can start to get the sketch to look more like something that is 3D or an actual colored in sketch. Now this is a part of the longer process here, is to color in all the parts you need. So I'm going to do just a really quick once over, so that way it doesn't take too long and you can see the effects, but also we're not too worried about it being too messy. So as you can see there, I've colored in her face on this sketch. What we can also do is switch a little bit to the burn tool. We'll switch to the dodge and burn tool, then we'll switch to burn down here at the bottom on the options, so that way we can put in some shadows in the image where we think where the shadows are. And we can make sure to change your size of your brush. You can use that using the bracket keys on your keyboard. Left bracket, right bracket changes the size of your brush. And we'll brush in some shadows here on the image, right where the shadows seem to be. If you have a sketch that has the shadows on it, it makes it easier for you to burn in some shadows. And every time you click and burn in the shadows, it will stack on top of each other, so it will make the shadows darker and darker as you continue burning. Now you can see that there are lines here that we can easily tell between the color and the shadows. So from there, we can do a little bit of smudging, and smudging allows us to mix the colors together so that way they are not just lines on the picture. So we'll actually turn down the rate here of the smudging so that way it's not too obvious, and we'll start doing a little bit of smudging on the image here. You can make the lines turn into actual colors instead of very apparent as lines. And that is a very quick and easy way to get started with coloring. Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP. In this advanced tutorial, we'll show you how to do some tone mapping on the images that you might need to get some extra color or some extra different shadows and cool things that you would like to get on your photos. Starting out, what we'll do is take a picture right here. Like I've got a picture of a good night scene. We'll go ahead and start is we'll create a duplicate layer of the night scene. And what we need to do is create a special enhancement filter called Advanced Tone Mapping. Now, this doesn't normally come with GIMP, so I recommend that you go find a plugin for Advanced Tone Mapping. It's very easy to find on the internet. GIMP itself has a repository of plugins that you're able to find Advanced Tone Mapping. And once you get that and install it into your GIMP plugin folder, you're going to go into GIMP and use Enhance Advanced Tone Mapping under the filters. Then that will show you a pop-up dialog window that you'll want to switch the copies of the merge layer. You want to make it about 5. Press OK. It'll create a bunch of different colors and make the whole thing look really good. From there, you want to right-click on the layer and click Merge Down, and just merge down until you get one picture, one layer. Next, you'll want to go up to the colors and do levels. And on the levels, you want to switch that to maybe about 94, 93, or 92 on the gamma. Press OK there so we can get that into our picture. The next thing you want to do is create another duplicate layer. And then on that layer, you want to click Colors, Desaturate. And from there, you want to actually have it at lightness. You can do luminosity, you can do average. You can see that it changes the different shades of gray. But let's choose lightness, click OK. And then you want to go back over to colors, click invert, and you'll see all the different colors inverted here. Then you want to go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur. And you want to set that blur to about, I think I want to do 20. 20 here seems fine. So now to blur the whole image, what we're going to do with this blurred image is we are going to switch the mode on the top layer here to overlay. And now you'll see it has overlaid onto our image down below. And you want to tweak this by using the opacity bar over here on the right. So we're going to set that to about 48, and then we will merge the layers down, and now you can see we have our new image that shows the different tone maps of color that are in our night sky image. And that's how you get some tone maps in your GIMP program. Welcome to the next in our advanced tutorial series in GIMP. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to remove noise from photos where pictures have been taken that have a lot of noise in them. And here you'll see we have started with a picture that has a bunch of noise in it, and we're going to remove the noise, and we can do this in many different ways, including going to the filter option, blur. We can do a regular blur, or we can do a Gaussian blur. And a lot of people like to use these blurs to get rid of the noise in the image. However, there is a better tool to get rid of the noise in images. It is an extra GIMP plugin that you can go find. Once you download that and put it into your GIMP program, you'll see it under your Enhance Filter options, and it's called Wavelet Denoise. And Wavelet Denoise will allow you to bring up this dialog box that produces a better algorithm to remove the noise from your images. And when you go into it, you can see a preview of the image and the noise that will get reduced. So you can move around and find where most of the noise is coming from. And then you can go down to the thresholds and you can turn up the amount of noise being removed from the image. And you can decide whether or not you want to have more or less detail left in the image. And you can also change how much detail can be conserved when you start applying the denoise filter to the image. And then you hit OK, And you can see that it has reduced a lot of the noise in the image, and you can tweak this as you like. And there are many other different ways you can do this, but this is probably one of the best ways to remove noise from an image to make it look a little bit better to your clients or to any projects you might have in the future. And that is a quick way of how to remove extra kinds of film grain or noise in your images. Welcome to the next tutorial in our Advanced GIMP tutorial series. This tutorial will show you about how to use luminosity masks to help you with your photos, so that way you can reduce some of the saturation in the colors of your photos, or just in general have better control over what you see inside of your photos. To start off, we have an image open here, which we're going to use luminosity masks to remove some of the saturation in the photo so we can see more of the mountain behind. So if you go over to the left, you can see we are normally on our layers section here, and we want to create a copy of our original layer, so duplicate layer. And then we want to go over to channels, and you can see what we're going to do here is select our red channel from the rest of our channels here. We want to select all on our image. We're going to drag the red channel down to the copy down here, and then we will start by creating this one as the L for light, because we're going to save the highlights of the image and we're going to save the shadows of the image. We'll start this by right-clicking on the light part of the image, and we will subtract from selection. Make sure your entire image is still selected. That will select the darker parts of the image. And we will go to select, save to channel. That'll actually save the shadows of the image. So we'll save that as D for dark. And then if you right click on our layer again, our light channel here, click subtract from selection one more time, it gets even further darker, and we'll save that as DD. And then we'll go back to our lights again, subtract from selection one more time, and we'll save that as DDD. So that way you can see all the different shadows have been saved now out of our image. And we'll now go and save the lighter parts of our image instead of our darker parts. So select none, then go to our darker parts of our image, select all. And when you do this, you will get the lighter parts of the image instead of the darker parts. And you will do the same thing as you did before, which is you will click Save to Channel, and then I'll save this as LL, go back to the dark parts, subtract from selection, and we'll do it again, select, Save to Channel, and then we'll save that as LLL. In doing this, you will have created a whole bunch of different channels for your different shadows and highlights in your image, and we'll be using that as a part of our layer masks to create luminosity masks. Now if you go back over to the layers, you can click on your copy, which I'll set here as light mask, and then I'll make another copy of this, which we'll call the dark mask. And then for the light mask, we'll right click and then make sure that your selection is none. So we'll right click on the light mask, click add layer mask. Instead of normally you would make it white, we'll set it to channel. And you can see under our channel, we actually have all of our different channels here for our shadows and our highlights. So if we go to our light channel, we can add that, and it will actually change it so you can see our light channel removes all of our shadows from the image. And now we're able to edit the image of our luminosity layer by going to colors and colorize, making sure that our light mask layer is chosen, not the mask itself. And with the sliders here, you can see I can change the hue of the image to make it a lot better, and the lightness of the image. So that way it can come through without too much saturation going on in the image. And you can compare that to the original image, which you'll see here. Saturation, removed saturation. And there's a lot more things you can do with luminosity masks.
Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP. In this next tutorial, we'll show you how to create a contrast mask for your image. To create a contrast mask for your image, you've opened a previous image you may have seen on our previous tutorials here. To start with, we will create a duplicate layer of the image. Then on there, we will right-click, click Add Layer Mask, and you want to initialize the layer mask to a grayscale copy of the layer. Then, show the layer mask so we can see what we're looking at. Go over to Colors, Invert, and then you want to also give a filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And then set that to about 4 or 5 on the blur radius. Next, go back to your layer mask, click Show Layer Mask to turn it off, and there you can see we have our contrast mask on our layer. Now make sure to set your layer to overlay instead of normal, so that way you can see our contrast on top of our bottom layer in GIMP. And you can change the opacity, so you can change the contrast through this contrast mask in GIMP. And that's all you need to know about making a contrast mask.
Welcome to the next tutorial in GIMP. This is a very quick tutorial, part 1, about changing background color in GIMP. It's actually a very quick way to do this in GIMP, especially if you have an image that already has a background color you'd like to remove. So the fastest way to change the color in your background is go up to Colors, Color to Alpha, and then you will see that there will be a color picker that you can pick down here, a little drop down box from blank color to alpha, and then you can click on this little eyedropper here, click on the image, then go back to your color picker, press OK, and you'll see on the preview that it has removed the color from your background. Click OK there. The color will have been removed from your background. You may now add a new layer to your image. Make sure to have it as a transparent layer. Drag that layer beneath your current layer, which you removed your color by putting it into alpha. And then you can use the bucket fill tool to switch to any other color you'd like to add to your image. And that is the very basics about changing a background color.
Welcome to the next in our tutorials about GIMP.
In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to change the background color in GIMP. This will be part 2 of our tutorials showing you how to change the background color. Another way you can change the background color in GIMP that is quite easy is go to your image, right-click, add an alpha channel if it doesn't have one already, and then from there you want to use the fuzzy select tool to select the part of the image you would like to delete to give ourselves a transparency. So you can see here it has selected all of the color besides the text itself, and if we were to continue from here, it would actually get rid of the background except for the other colors that we need to get rid of inside of the letters. To add the circles inside the text, you want to hold down the Shift button, which will add a plus symbol next to your fuzzy selector, and you can now add those bits inside the text into your selection. And doing so will allow you to delete all the parts of the image you want to get your alpha channel. So once you're finished there, just hit delete on your keyboard, and you'll see the background is now fully removed. And just like before, you can add a new layer with a transparency, put that below your current layer, and add a new color to your image by using the bucket fill tool. And that's another way about changing background color.
In our next tutorial
in GIMP, we're going to show you what some of the blur filters can do to our images and add extra cool effects
that might not be available elsewhere. We'll start by using our blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize blur filters, and that way you can see all the neat types of things you can do with your image. As you can see, we started with a bunch of duplicate layers of our original image and renamed them to blur, Gaussian blur, motion blur, and pixelize. From there, we can select our blur layer, turn that visibility on, and then go up to the filters, blur, and then blur. And it'll add a subtle blur effect to the image. You can see it on here. It's now much different from the original image. The details have been lost. And then we'll go up to our Gaussian blur, turn that visibility on, go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll turn the blur radius to about 11 seems fine. That's our Gaussian blur. And then we'll go to motion blur, turn that one on, go to filters, blur, motion blur. We're going to make it a zoom, maybe about the center of the image here. The length of the zoom we'll put about 28. And it'll take a little bit longer to do this effect if your image is large. So now you can see that there is a kind of rush to get to the mountain look to the image. It's really cool. Then we'll go to our pixelize layer. Go to there, go to filter, blur, pixelize, and it'll create a kind of chunky pixel look to the image. So it'll actually kind of blur it out in something that's kind of like if you censor an image or protect someone's face or anything like that, you might see somebody has done something like this. So we'll set the pixel width to 7 and the pixel height to 7. And that is the pixelized blur on our image. So if we want to go back to regular blur, let's remove all the different visibilities of the other image. And we can change the opacity on this blur, so we can change how much of the blur obscures the image, which is okay. If we go to Gaussian blur, we can do this with our opacity in such a way where we create kind of a hazy look to the image. You can see it looks like it's in some sort of a dream. Then to motion blur, if you wanted to change the opacity on there, it creates more of a kind of like ray-like effect coming out from the image itself. So you can dial that in as much as you want or as you like. Then if we go to pixelize, we can do the same thing where we can turn the opacity up or down on that, but it just changes whether or not the blocks show up. What we can do here is we can select part of the image and we can create kind of a border in the image. And to do that, we've selected a spot in the image. And then you'll want to go to the pixelize layer, add a layer mask, make it the selection that we've just put onto our layer, but invert the mask because we want a border on the inside and not just the inside of the selection as our pixelized blur. And then click add, and you can see now on the edges of the image, if you right click, select none, you can see on the edges of the image there's a nice pixelized border. And that's an intro to some of the different blur filters. Welcome back to our tutorials in GIMP. For our next tutorial, we'll show you about the selective Gaussian blur and how it can be used to remove noise from your images. Just like our previous tutorials where we've shown you how to reduce noise, we can select part of the image that we want to remove the noise from. As you can see here, I have a selection. Then go up to Filters, Blur, Selective Gaussian Blur. And in that, you want to select where the delta is. That's basically telling the Gaussian blur how much of the image you'd like to remove the noise from, and set the blur radius so that way it can come out looking good. As we hit OK here, you can see that it has removed a lot of the noise from the image by getting rid of the noise through the blur. And that's just a quick way to show you how to do selective Gaussian
to our next
blur
tutorial in
GIMP.
GIMP.
We'll go over more tools that have been used in GIMP to create different effects in your image. The tools we'll go over for this part of our tutorial will include the clone tool, the healing tool, the perspective clone tool, the blur and sharpen tool, the smudge tool, and the dodge and burn tool. Starting out with the clone tool, if you go to our image that you see here, it will not let you do anything with the brush until you hold down Control, click a source on the image, and then it'll use that source when you decide to paint on your image, thus duplicating the image as you paint over it. The next tool, the healing tool, allows you to heal parts of the image much like in Photoshop when you want to fix parts of your image that have blemishes on them or other various problems. Much like the clone tool, you have to set a part of the image that you would like to use as the basis for healing the rest of the image. And as we start moving through our image, it'll try to heal the image based on what's around it, as opposed to the previous clone part where it just copied whatever it was using the source as. For the perspective clone tool, we can modify the perspective of our image, not in a permanent way, but in a way that GIMP will use when we decide to clone the rest of the image later. By going to the perspective clone option in the tool options, we can now set a source that we'd like to clone from, say this corner up here where the perspective will be changed, and we can paint that into our image. And as you can see, the perspective of the image in the upper left is now in our bottom right at a very different perspective. The next tool, Blur and Sharpen tool, we can set to blur. And then on our image, we can start blurring out parts of the image as we need to. And then if you set that to sharpen, you can sharpen parts of the image as you need to. You can turn up the rate on this to increase the sharpen amount, so that way you do not have to sharpen more than once on an image. If you go to the smudge tool, this will use the colors around it and smudge them together so they become more of a blur with all the colors that are included when you start smudging. The next tool, the dodge and burn tool, allows you to dodge, which is lighten up the colors in an image, but also do burn, which allows you to darken the colors in the image, creating more vibrant color as necessary. And those are some of the more advanced tools you will use. In our next tutorial of GIMP, we'll go over some of the color tools that you'll use on your images to change various parts of your image. Much like Photoshop, these are some of the main tools you will use to switch color balance, brightness and contrast, curves, and more. So to start off, we'll go to the Colors section, Color Balance. This is probably the main tool many people use to change the actual color in the image to something that they think is much more appropriate for the image in general. And as you can see, we can change these values to increase more of the color that we want to add to the image or subtract the color. And we can change the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights of the image. The next tool is Hue Saturation, which allows us to change overall the hue colors that are added to our image. So we can make it a green or a pink or what have you. We can change the lightness of the image, how much extra light is in the image, or if there's more shadows. And we can add more saturation of color to the image or make it more toward grayscale. With the Colorize option, we can do this in a more direct way, where it adds the color directly over all of the image. And of course, you can do this with the saturation and the lightness as well. With the brightness contrast, we can change the brightness to be less on the image, the contrast to be more, and vice versa. With the threshold, we can change what the image sees in terms of darkness or light. And for this, I would recommend using a layer mask so you can have something to blend over the image itself instead of leaving this as its own layer. With levels, we can go in and change the gamma on the image, so we can reduce the gamma, make it darker, or add more gamma to make it lighter. With the curves, this is much like Photoshop, where you have a histogram and you can set the points on the curves to drag down the shadows, increase the highlights, and change the way the image looks on a very granular basis. If you go to Posterize, it creates an image that reduces its colors into various channels of colors.
You don't see many colors if you go lower on the posterized levels. That looks like it was created in older graphics editors. If you go to desaturate, we've been using this in a lot of our previous tutorials where we can desaturate by removing the colors from the image, and we can choose based on the luminosity, the average, or the lightness in the image. And that is just a quick overview of all the different color tools you could use in GIMP. Welcome to our next tutorial in GIMP. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to use the Paths tool inside of GIMP. So go over and click your Paths tool here, and on the left in the tool options, you will see that you have the Design mode, the Edit mode, and the Move mode. The Design mode allows you to create points on your image that will create a path. To connect the paths together so that way you create a completed path, go to Edit once you are finished clicking on the last point for your path, and then click on the starting point of your path. That will complete your path. From there you can move the path if you need to, and you can start doing a selection from the path or stroke the path if you need to. As a solid color pattern, you can set the pixels of the line and so on. Another mode you can do with paths is you can create a new path where you can create a curvature to your path. And this allows people to create some very interesting and unique paths. To create this path, you must make sure that you have the polygonal option turned off. And that's a very basic way to use paths in GIMP. Welcome to our next tutorial in GIMP. Now, in our previous tutorials of GIMP, you may have asked yourself, how do I install those scripts, plugins, and brushes that I see on the internet for GIMP? For example, we actually had a filter earlier that we used called the Advanced Tone Mapping, and we actually had to install that into our GIMP plugins folder, and the Wavelet Denoise we also had to install. So how do you do that? Well, once you find the plugin of your choice, for example, when we had to get Wavelet Denoise, you can go into your folders for GIMP, usually under Program Files, GIMP2, and then you'll see the different folders you have for GIMP. If you go into the lib folder, then go into GIMP, then go to 2.0 or whatever the version is, you will find the Plugins folder. And this is the folder you will want to bring any plugins that are exe files that GIMP uses as extra plugins for its program. As you can see here, the Wavelet Denoise program is where we put that plugin. For other different things you want to put in your GIMP program, you go to the Share folder, the GIMP folder inside there, the version folder inside there, and then you can see that there are brushes folders, scripts folders, and various other folders you can bring extra things into GIMP to use for your projects. So if you have a script, for example, the Advanced Tone Mapping script, this is where it goes inside your GIMP program. And once you put those files into the correct folders you need to put them in, all you have to do is restart your GIMP, and you are ready to use your scripts, plugins, and brushes.